Hi guys, and welcome back to Dice Down Gaming. This week it's Dan, and we are talking about Warmachine Mark 4. We're going to look at win rates of Warmachine armies post the January update, and then we are going to take a just sort of have a talk about what me and Dan like about the game at the moment and the Mark 4 rule system, and then things we might improve or change. Not in any order. We're just going to have a bit of a catch up this week, have a bit of a chat.
Yeah,
If anyone's watching, thank you for watching us. How's your week been? Have you played any games? How are you? And Dan, most important question of every week: how are you, my friend?
I'm really good. I got back from holiday. You went on holiday. I went on holiday.
Yep.
Come back. I painted one Phantasm. I've got another one that's primed, ready to go. I've played 3 games with it this week. First game did the typical. My opponent deployed. I deployed. My opponent moved up. I moved up. I forgot that something had that a Wyvern had -3 range to me shooting it. So when I moved within 12 of it with my Phantasm, thinking, oh, I'm going to kinetic grip you and you're going to be -2 speed. That was a no, and then he took off my Phantasms. That was the typical. You've built up a model, you
New model
painted it,
syndrome, innit?
you got syndrome, dice turn 2. You've done absolutely nothing with it. But then on yesterday, managed to play 2 games, and the Phantasm got the win in the first one where he hit Butcher from Orgoth and just killed him, just casual, just yeah, that was easy. And then played another game against pigs, which was really interesting. The pigs, and I set up everything thinking everything's gonna be okay because Syrafil's feet's gonna help me here. And then I spiked the damage roll, so the big warhog, we didn't get pushed away, and the Phantasm died again. But yeah, it's I've been really enjoying it. I've noticed my clock has taken a battering with trying to position it. It sounds silly because it's only one model, but trying to work out actually what's going to go around it, the angles of other units as well. Not too much. I still don't worry about clock, but it's more going, okay, I need to speed this up. This is why you practice. But yeah, other than that, life's good. Yeah, going well. How about you, Aaron? How have you been?
I'm very good, thank you. A quick one from the chat. Darker Days Radio, thanks for tuning in, buddy. She's had a good week, had a game on Thursday, and can non-stop coaching that player at the club as he won the game. Maybe his fourth or fifth game. Fantastic. First win of
Nice.
War Machine is always a great feel.
Yeah.
Otherwise, PeachCon was really good as I run 6 or so demos of the game and chatted to people wanting to return. Definitely an antidote to the stoleness of 40k. Yeah, excellent, excellent. I'm really glad that sort of the guy you're coaching won the game. I think the first win in one seemed excellent, and I'm glad the PeachCon went well. Yeah. So in terms of me, yeah, we both went on holiday. I'm back from Greece, we're back from Turkey. So that was really good. And then this week, I managed to get 2 games in. One in person on Wednesday, and that was against Orgoth and our lovely local Rid, who is playing Butcher, and I had 4 units of Marauder Crew and Lockerbash. So there was potential there for Butcher to homicidal maniac through a lot of fellas. I was really conscious about that and tried to either stay outside of 14 or didn't, or sort of break the Conga chain so there wasn't a line he could go through. I ended up getting ahead on that, and Butcher had to commit. And I did my first ever combined range attack with my pig galley crew, who have got a net and I got knocked down. So my little my little chefs knocked down Butcher, and then Shum unfortunately ate Butcher. So that was a win. And then I played a game on War Table as part of like the UK War Table League that's running at the moment. And I played a Boom Howler list, which was again sort of lots of Marauder Crew into Gravediggers. And in that one, the first roll was really important because the table is like a generated map on War Table. In one corner, I had like 4 forests in one corner of the table.
Right.
Uh, um,
Interesting.
and then on the other side, there was a big obstruction in the middle and an obstruction on the left. So we both felt that, if I could take the bottom left and use that forest to hide, but use that forest to hide my Marauder Crew, and then also not have to interact with these 2 obstructions, whoever won that role was going to take second and avoid that table area. But I won the role, and I took second, and then took the bottom half. So I had these forests to play with, and I had duck and cover and force barrier and rough seas. So it's quite hard to shoot my army, and I managed. It was 2 fronts. So on my turn too, I managed to score 6 points with the double scoring on the unit side. My opponent scored 0 because I contested stuff, and then unfortunately on his turn he scored 2, and I still scored 1.
Yeah.
So 7-2 on his turn 3. So 2 enjoyable games. I think, I think Brian Blood Marauder spam's obviously very powerful, so also running very powerful lists, so that helps. But yeah, two really good games. Really enjoying Warmachine at the moment, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at, when we talk about sort of good, bad, the ugly, we're focusing on Mark IV and the armies. So we had a bit of a chat off, take away the curtain. We had a bit of a chat before the show, and we said we're not going to talk about the steamroller or about sort of production or models today. We're going to talk about the Mark IV rules and the factions.
Yeah, that's a good shout because I think everyone's aware. Simple games have got issues with their production at the moment. There's also been some things about people getting Nostilla and Aberration, and it's not the model that they showed. Neither of these things are good, and I think you could probably spend a show talking about that to length. So for now, for today, we're not going to talk about that. We may address that in next week or whatever, but we're not going to focus on that today. So what we are going to do is on my screen, and you guys can see, we have got the win rates for the Mark IV. All of the armies. But we're going to focus on Mark IV armies because they've got enough games to be relevant in the data you get. One standout before we go into the Mark IV armies, I think, is Infernals. They're at 500 games. I've filtered this data to be post-January update. So this is from the end of January till today. So that's about 6 months-ish, 7 months of games. Infernals are at 500 games and a 57% win rate. That number is quite a lot more than any other Mark III faction, apart from Dark Operations, but they're sort of like they're the new Cephalic stuff, and they're at a 57% win rate. So Infernals are, I think, one of them armies that if you still have the army, they're still very potent, and people won't know what they do. So I think that will give you a bit of an edge. And I certainly have never played against Infernals, because when I left the game, that was pre-Infernals happening. Then when I came back, obviously, to Mark IV, there you can't buy them. Yeah. So how about you? Have you played against Infernals then?
Yeah, so I played them a load in Mark III, and they were a scourge of Mark III. They came out with so powerful, but also because of various issues with production and distribution from Privateer Press at the time, and is it Black Sail Gaming? I may have made that.
Black. Oh, I know what you mean. It went to America and it was only black something.
America, and you had to get it from this one company, so it meant that only very few people had it. So that meant that the people that had it, like you said, people that've got it, really practiced with it, able to do it really well. People that have not seen it, it was hard to get reps in. But I played against it a lot at tournaments, and really struggled. They were at the time. It was during CID, that era, and there was definitely a feeling that Infernals were very overtuned and were just absolutely wrecking the meta. I was playing Grimkin at the time, not a weak army by any stretch, and I was we were really finding it locally, our local steam rollers and things like that, and being part of sort of, they used to do like a UK invitational league thing where certain events meant that you could get an invite to go into this invite thing, and yeah, they were very, very strong. Lovely looking force, but trying to get, I was tempted definitely back in Mark III, but just the price of trying to get hold of things from America, and even now, I think that they're probably like gold dust. I can see them dark horsing the Welsh, just because, as you say, the people that've got them and have played with them are going to be really practiced and going to have all those reps, and know what they're doing. They're probably going to be really well painted as well because they've had so long and they've had plenty of time for it. But yeah, but also it's one of those things, I don't know about you, but because locally we're focusing more on those Mark IV factions, we're not really worried about them too much.
No. A quick one from the chat. Darker Day said, I've been diving back into the Mark I and Mark II books to get ideas for a narrative campaign. That sounds awesome and loads of fun. And he also said Black Anchor Heavy Industries.
That's it.
Were the American only thing where you buy all stuff. Yeah, so it's certainly in terms of Mark IV. And Infernals. I know there's a lovely fella called Zilv who's on the WTC team for England, who I think after speaking to the team, he's considered to be like the best player in the UK and also runs Infernals. So I think he's got an absolutely fantastic shot at the Welsh. And like you say, locally, no one's got the army and no one can really buy the army. So unless we sort of decided to maybe go rep against ourselves on War Table and try and learn the army, which I don't think is very productive, we're not going to play against them. So we've just sort of decided locally that if we play against them, people will tell us what they do, and we'll learn it then.
Yeah.
So it's good to point out though they're still on a very good win rate. lower games than Mark IV armies, but a lot more games than other Mark III armies, like Secret Dominion from Circle, for example. They're five times the amount of games of most other Mark III armies.
Yeah.
Then taking a look at Mark IV armies, I think it shows a pretty healthy state of the game. So between all Mark IV armies, we're looking at a 45 and 56% win rate. That covers all 9 Mark IV armies. At the bottom, I think probably unsurprisingly, we've got Winter Corps, and they're at 45. I think interestingly, so that most Mark IV armies have between about 1,200 and 1,500 games, and that's in about a 6-month period. So that feels quite a healthy amount of games. If every month it's about 280 games ish, and that's only games that are logged onto long chains. Obviously, all the games that will be playing in local clubs and that aren't on here. So I think it paints a healthy picture of the game, which is nice. You've got Winter Corps to 1,500, and then above that you've got Gravediggers. They're only 900 games, so they're less than the Mark IV factions, and they're at a 46% win rate. I don't think that surprises me. How about you?
The reason it doesn't surprise me is because from what I've read and having talked to and chatted to other people, they're quite a finesse army, and I think it's very easy to just have your army lifted. And depending on how you built your lists as well, I think we had a good chat with Chris, who spoke about obviously there's different varieties of lists, and obviously there's mod availability, what's come out or hasn't. I don't think it's unusual for it to be slightly under 50%, because people are going to be probably playing games where they've had half an army and they've had bits and they've built it up as time goes on. So that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't mean that they're weak. I just think that they don't have enough data at the moment and it's too early in their life cycle. Again, wouldn't be surprised if Chris, I know we spoke to him, ends up doing really well at the Welsh. I know he spoke about he obviously wants to win the whole thing. Wouldn't be surprised if that happens.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they are a bit of a finesse army, and typically they can run lots of single wound infantry, so they're vulnerable in the meta. They do have the tools to probably still do well, but like you say, I think if you're not very practiced with it, you're vulnerable to being punished, and also you tend to run quite a low model count army because everything's rather expensive. So some of your single wound infantry is still quite expensive, so you need to be positioning that and putting it in and getting out value about it as much as you can. So, and also, like you say, they're also still a new army, and some of these games might be where someone has gone to an event with the first 2 boxes because they wanted to play the army, so might not be playing optimized lists. So that's great, because then we shoot up, and actually this paints a really great picture that we shoot up to 48% for your House Callus, and then we go 51% for Brian Bloods, 52% for Shadowflame Shard, 53% for Storm Legion, 53% for Sea Raiders, though I would say that is essentially Horus. And when you actually look at the faction, it's Horus is above nearly 60%, and the rest of them are lower. So really, this is being held up by Horus as a whole faction. That old Umbre. There you go.
Sorry, we spoke to Dave about that exact thing, didn't we? And during our faction focus and during our conversations with Reed and with local players as well, definitely that is an issue with the faction. And I think that's it happens though, but also I think it happens because of when Orgoth were released in the sort of Mark IV cycle, because they're they're not a Steamforge army, for want of a better phrase. I think that you can tell now, a bit like with Winter Corps, they're just showing a bit of their age and a bit of the sort of maybe the bit of conservatism from PP.
I think it's interesting because Storm Legion sort of fall into that early era with Winter Corps, but they've managed to hang on a bit better, and I think that's really down to Calder and Huxley. Very much all the competitive pairings for Storm Legion are those 2 Warcasters, so I think they're really also propping that faction up at the moment in terms of their win rate. Arthur Carvalho, and apologies if that's wrong, what is your guys' and experience with Legion Everblight? I've always liked the army and recently got the opportunity to have some models and to proxy some other to play in a friendly local group. So first of all, me and Dan obviously played Mark II and Mark III, played loads of Legion. Actually, they're like my bane of Mark II for Circle. I mean, what more do you want than big dragon war beasts and cool sort of looking models? I mean, it looks fantastic, and I think the game's in a pretty decent place. That if you can get a list together and play a game and play some people that are similarly minded to you, regardless of what happens, you'll probably have a good time. I think you'd agree, Dan.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I would say grab the models, grab some proxies, roll some dice. I find it's also a game that the more you deep dive, the more you want to know.
Yeah.
Right, you play that first game, like you read your army list, you're like, oh, I'm going to put this buff here, and maybe I'll feat, and that sounds good. You get into the game, and you're like, oh, but what if I put this unit with this spell, and I've got this heavy? So I think grab a game, and if you like it, you'll only want to play more.
Yeah, the more reps you have as well. It's what I think. The massive benefit of Warmachine is it can be hard to start, but you really ramp up in your skill. Having sort of tutoring and coaching Steve, one of our locals, I'm playing him tomorrow actually. It really shows that actually when you start to there is a great depth to the game, whether that's just through positioning or just interacting with rules. Even yesterday, me thinking about how I can give out Pathfinder just with an ability rather than using the Pathfinder card. Just thinking about actually is it sometimes that better than an ancillary attack. So I think definitely keep going. Legion for me, I loved mods. I had a Legion army for a little bit. Rarely played them, painted them all up in about a weekend. But yeah, I think lovely models. Would really recommend just carry on with the game, enjoying it, and hopefully if you meet those like-minded people, it's just a fantastic game. It looks so good fully painted, which we had obviously yesterday.
Yeah. I think we're quite fortunate now that I'm fully painted. You've been fully painted for ages. Sherwin, Dave, Rid, Paul. People that locally tend to play fully painted, and we're really seeing that once you've got some nice. You move away from this completely 2D terrain to sort of 2.5, where you can put something on it but lift it off, and you play with some painted forces. I'd say that the game rivals 40k in how it can look and the shots you can get during a game.
100%.
So I think we're really enjoying how nice the game's looking locally. Now we've all sort of mainly me. Everyone else is pretty much painted before me, but now we're all up. Now I'm up to speed with everyone else. It's looking good.
It's right. We've got Dave locally that's bashed out nearly an entire faction of Shadowflame Shard, but he's painted 2 of his cricks that he's had since last year. So.
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty much done his 2 Welsh Masters lists in the time it's taken me to do about 70 points of Brian Blood. So he's absolutely monster. But in terms of the Mark IV win rates, I think what we're seeing is a relatively well balanced game. I think 45. What we'd expect in the January update is that probably see Winter Court to get some sort of uplift.
Yeah.
And it's good to know also there's a secondary graph I can bring up, and there's a nice little feature on it. That what it does do is it brings up some leaders in armies that are a 5% difference above the actual army's win rate. So, for example, what we previously said is that Sea Raiders are at I think 53% win rate. But what it shows here that Horus, as a leader in that army, is at a 63% win rate. So, like we said, that is largely faction. It's largely being lifted up by Horus. And a similar thing, what happened with what we're seeing with Kaiphos, and probably why Cricks have seen this uptick, is that Kaiphos is at a 63% win rate, where Cricks are at a 56% win rate. So you have 2 casters that are performing quite highly above their army's win rate. There's also Zataroth in Infernals, who has got a 63% win rate. The army's at 57, so that's not too far away from the army. And there's also Lycia, which is a Mark III faction. But it's interesting to see, those Horus and those Kaiphos and those Zataroth are sort of propping up that faction almost. Darker Days, at PeachCon, people really appreciated seeing all my painted armies and painted 3D terrain that is not the 40k cereal box terrain. Yep, and it's quite funny recently, there's been a bit of a scandal. Have you heard about this with 40k terrain? There's
Perspex?
The Perspex terrain, yeah. So, bit of background, maybe people haven't heard. Some people are getting upset with the L-shaped terrain, that it's quite easy to, if you've got a little bit of L-shaped terrain within range of an objective and you plonk your Tau Pathfinder in that L-shaped terrain, and then your opponent forgets about it 2 turns later, and they think they've scored an objective and they haven't. You go, oh no, I've got this little model behind this wall. People getting fed up with that. So now we've removed the element of colour from terrain, and a tournament ran L-shaped terrain, but only clear Perspex terrain. So you had a gaming mat and a bunch of clear Perspex terrain.
I think they made a mistake with the gaming mat. I think they should have just had the wooden table underneath. I think what is the point of painting a model at that stage? I know that back in Mark II, we used to have some Warmachine players that would literally put some bits of model on a base and be like, "That's my Banes for Cricks." Yeah, I think why encourage the hobby side of it, or want to take nice photos? We're here just play, and thankfully they're playing a really tight rule set of competitive game where that's just the final cherry on the cake. I completely agree with it. I think it's the best thing that they could have done for making 40k even better as an experience.
Yeah, so that's hilarious. Yeah, we were enjoying the painted game locally, and I think it's a good point that 40k is almost ironically sort of, even though they do have fantastic models, the competitive scene, even though the large events are fully painted, as much as fully painted is, you can just do a free color OSL army like you can in Warmachine, and that's completely fair. Their terrain has really, I think, taken a step backwards with their ITC fixed maps that are all L-shaped blocks, and there's 4 layouts you can play. You put your L-shaped ruins in different places, so that's the only variation you really have. So I think that's actually taken a step back. So if we can, you go, mate.
What a crazy world that if we spoke back in Mark II that in 10 years' time that Warmachine's going to have 3D terrain and fully painted armies, and 40k is going to have 2D perspex terrain, we'd have all said this is nonsense. For me, there's been a seismic shift, particularly with Games Workshop with 40k, and I think whenever I see Vanguard Gaming, I think it's called, from the 40k guys, I always think the competitive 40k players are like Warmachine Mark II players from 10 years ago. They're only just catching up with clean play. They're only just catching up, and that's not being derogatory. That's just as in their system and their ecosystem of their community is just behind of where competitive players, and now we've actually gone through the other side, and we're still competitive at Warmachine, but actually we've gone, no, we need to introduce that color, that flavor on tables and through armies as well. So it's interesting.
Absolutely, loads of chat going on. So this is awesome. We're so grateful for you to tune in. Darker Days is a person who started with 40k, second ed in '94. This is the utter anathema to Wargaming. Then Arthur said the deal it's 40k. It's not a game created for gaming. It's a model industry that decided to create a game, and then obviously you've got the problem that people are trying to make this into a competitive game. Though I would say that 40k have done quite a lot to market themselves to competitive people in recent days. They've got an article on MetaWatch. They publicly poach their own win rates of their armies. They actively sort of liaise with the ITC scene now. So as much as they are a model company, I think they're also promoting their competitive side as much as they are anyone else.
Because it drives sales.
To make some money.
Honest,
yeah.
And it's okay, and that's perfectly fine. It's interesting as a Mark II Warmachine player that's also then played a whole host of other systems since. It's just interesting to see how they're sort of catching up in some ways. And then personally, I can remember going to one Warmachine event in Mark II where there wasn't there wasn't perspex, there was coloured cardboard paper, and there was like a pink meant one thing, blue meant another. And I'll be honest with you, it was the worst tournament I've ever been to. It was the least engaging. It was awful. And that's not what Wargaming's about. Like, we could play on War Table. That would give a 2D experience. But there's a reason why you go out and you paint your models and you take your time to buy these pieces of plastic.
Absolutely. Arthur says that's why I'm enjoying so much Warmachine Trench Crusade. Darker, I dislike how Gilbert also went to 2D terrain from the Wargaming article. Back in 2011, former Civilization video game designer Soren Johnson published an article in Game Developer magazine arguing given the players will optimize the fun out of a game. True. So I think you get a great point there, Dan, because previously, Warmachine got a bit of sort of like a meme, a bit of a stigma around it. They play grey armies and they play with 2D terrain, which was pretty fair, to be honest. Most events were that, but we almost sort of got pushed through that phase. And now, sort of, people I think realise that you're probably right. When someone walks past the table and you're playing with 2D terrain and no nothing painted, it looks a bit shit. So people are, I think, now more keen to paint their forces. And I'd say, the London Steamroller that I went to, that would have been this month, yeah. I think out of the 8 armies there, I think 7 were fully painted. And that wasn't required to be fully painted. You didn't have to paint that at all.
And I think we've also, I think I think things like COVID, where people had a lot of time to paint and hobby, may have shifted the sort of atmosphere around it. But I think ultimately, one of the good things we talk about what's good about sort of Mark IV Warmachine. I think one of the it's going a bit ahead, but one of the benefits is that armies are smaller, so you can get them painted.
No, let's jump into that now. I think we've covered the win rates of armies, and I think we can summarise that Warmachine Mark IV, given the overall win rates, is looking pretty healthy, which is always great. So,
So my first good then is that units are smaller, armies are therefore less cumbersome in the model count, and therefore you can hobby and focus on those models more. You're getting sort of more use. Warmachine used to have a sort of a selling point that you will need less models than 40k, but those models will be more impactful as well, and they'll stay on the table a little bit longer typically, and things like that. And I think one benefit of Mark IV is reducing that unit size really helped. It helped to make sure that the game plays quicker. It's helped to ensure that you can get your models painted. It's helped to ensure as well that you're actually making choices for what actually this unit creates. It then causes the flip side. There's a downside to this later, but I think that actually having smaller unit count, less models has made the game better scalability wise. And I think that now, having played 50 points, having played all the points, but 50 point to 75 point to 100 points is a really nice progression. And I think that we locally have seen that people can really enjoy the game without feeling like it's really cumbersome to get an army ready or to buy an army even. Yes, the price obviously increased inflation, not in this economy, but it's one of those things.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point that you're running 3-man, 5-man units now. You can play a cohort heavy list, but when you compare what you need to paint for, if you compare it to something like Sigma or Old World, Heresy, 40k, you have to paint a lot less. So you're probably, if you do struggle with painting, which I'm a great example. I started the game late January. I think me and Dan played our first game like 30th of January. I've just finished, fully finished a 100-point list. So it took me about 6 months to paint my 100-point list. But if I was to have to paint a 100 model old world army, that'd probably take me a year. So the fact that your units are a bit smaller does help.
Yeah. And also, in relation to that, sort of in contrast to 40k, so there's nothing wrong with these game systems where you have a lot more models, and cinematically it looks fantastic when you have more models on the table. It can look great, and you can really buy into that sort of world. But sometimes it takes you so long to get an army to fully painted that by that time, if the rules or scenario or meta has adapted and shifted by then, it can sometimes then feel a bit frustrating to go, oh, I've spent ages building this army. Whereas I think one of the benefits of Mark IV is that you're using your units. Most units you're using in quite a lot of lists, and you can just keep passing it on. There is a couple of sort of units where you go, actually, I'm not going to use it too much. But I think I'd certainly say with the free rules, another benefit, massive thing, free rules. The fact that the app actually works to look up things. That War Room used to be a bit sporadic, and the fact that you can get those free rules, you can look things up before you purchase. I think that's a really good shift for Mark IV. So you can really plan your armies, and you can consider actually what am I buying.
Yeah, completely agree. Dark Lazy in the chat has got a few of his things that he said he thinks are his favourite selling points from Warmachine. One point is actually, I think, a really great point, and I've not really thought about it really, is that when you learn the game at 30 points, you are directly getting sort of transferable skills for larger points, and your rules/models are the same. If you compare it to like Combat Patrol in 40k, you play a different game with different rules, and your models have different rules. So when you want to say then jump to a 2,000 point game rather than playing Combat Patrol, you've got to almost relearn it. And I've not really thought about that as a perk. So I think that's a great shout from him. Dynamic game, no just sitting in circles, being pushed and pulled. Yeah, I think a fantastic shout. Free rules. I don't think we can really overstate how good the free rules truly is, because it's not just a free shit PDF. You could have free rules in a shitty PDF, and they say you can play for free, or you can spend £10 a year, a month, and we'll give you this nice, fully functioning interactive PDF that will update for you. It's completely free with a really, really good app. Okay, sometimes it takes a little while to load. Apart from that, you've got a fantastic app. All your rules are free. There's no campaign books. All your rule updates are free. I don't think they're really we can say good enough about that point.
Yeah.
If you compare it to sort of like the current system with 40k where you've got to buy. So I recently got back into Old World because I play at a few clubs, and one of the clubs I just started a slow grade. So I thought, you know what, I can't play Warmachine every club I go to. Let's play a second game. So I play Old World. So I had to buy the Old World core book, which is fucking massive. I had to buy the Evil Forces book. Then I had to buy like an Arcane Journal for my Evil Forces book. Then I had to buy a match played guide so I could have the match play scenarios for Old World. So I had to buy 4 books. There's been a 7-page errata to the core rule book. So even though I've got the book, a lot of the time I have to refer to an errata as well as the book. Compare that to, when I go to play a game of Warmachine, I bring a rucksack with some dice, a bunch of widgets, and a steamroller document. There's nothing else on me. When I go to play with Old World, I've got these 4 books on me. I think it's truly, we can't say good enough about free rules.
And also free rules in a really usable app where you can access things quickly. I would still, one of the things I'm looking forward to is getting physical cards and being able to mark damage on physical cards, not have to rely on an app. But being able to see all your rules on an app that's reliable and build lists really quickly is now a real. It's still a luxury actually, because playing Trench Crusade, I think one of the worst things about Trench Crusade is actually building a list. Because there's so much depth, and there's a really good website that I've been starting to use, and that's much better than what the previous sort of website everyone was using. But it's still rubbish compared to an app like Warmachine app, where actually it's really just straight away like point and click done, and it's saved. And you can obviously buy the full subscription, or you can have those the free version, which I've still got. You build you limited amount of lists, but actually, do you know what, it works really well. So I think overall, definitely massive plus is the rules and the app all being free. It's a big plus.
Totally agree. Andrew in the chat said, just started watching. Thank you for watching, Andrew. Did we cover Cricks? So we're not really deep diving factions this week. We did cover that Cricks have got actually the highest win rate of Mark IV armies. You're at 56%. And we sort of covered that Kaiphos propping you up a little bit in terms of your win rate as a faction. Darker Days carried on to say, classic roll to hit, wound, save, plus rerolls makes 40k homogeneous. You may as well not even roll and count up the attacks and remove. Yep, so most of the time you're like 3+ to hit with a reroll, etc. So it makes sense. Warmachine dice rolls all matter. Yeah, absolutely. And it also said the nearest game to has the Warmachine in the flow is Warcry. I agree with that. And RP, the G designer, I like dice balls though, so that is no surprise. I like Warmachine, Warcry, and RPGs. Yeah, totally agree with what you're saying there. So far we've definitely said the free rules are excellent, and sort of the army size is a nice size that you get a good amount of models, but not overwhelming, and it's paintable. I think another good thing while we're on the roll is for me, one thing sort of quite unique to Warmachine is the way feats sort of interact with in the game and how you sort of build a turn. So I feel like with Warmachine you have this really sort of nice puzzle to solve every turn, and at the start of the turn you start formulating your order of activation, where you might put a buff, where you might put a debuff, where you might use a placement effect, where you might push a model. And then often these things like link up, right? So I'm going to try and kill my opponent's Warcaster. I need this buff here. I need this model here to apply this debuff. I might want to slam this model out of the way, knock this model down, and instead I go my caster, I use my feet. I feel like the game has a really fantastic, almost like crescendo climax to a turn. You're building with these activations. You're putting things in place where you need them, and then it leads to this fantastic payoff where you've planned this assassination run, or you've lined up to kill a colossal, or say you've practiced a scenario, you're playing a scenario turn, and you want to contest these things and score these 3 things, and you finish your turn, you've done all of them. I think that gives you a really fantastic, satisfying feel at the end of that turn.
I think that all can be summed up in the tempo and pace of the game. You feel like you're building up, you're really layering effects, and one of the benefits of having played other systems where it's you go I go with alternating activations is that you have that reactivity to it, whereas one of the positives I like about Warmachine is the fact that actually being able to go, I can plan out and I'm going to try and do these set of things, and sometimes they don't all work. And I think that's a real benefit. I like the design when there's some risk factor to it, to you know stacking those effects and doing those things. But I think that's definitely, I love that building up and go, right, this is the cool, this is the aim for the cool thing at the end. Here's what I've done, and here's how the game's gone. And I completely agree with you with feats. I think feats are they're something I think that should be ensure that each character's or each leader's feat should be unique to them. And I think some of the feats where we've seen that we've not been so happy about or we thought needs changing sometimes aren't. They don't say just about balancing, but also need to be more unique. And it's we think back to Syrafil's old feat where it's like, hang on, this is like 3 feats in one. How is this fair? Kind of thing. I think for me, one downside though is that while I really like that layering and that feeling that satisfaction, I do feel the game is too lethal currently, and I feel that it could do with a tweak of sometimes there's not a lot of actual setup or interaction that means that you're at risk of things failing. I feel there's a lot of things where it's like, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, here's this buff, a bit like I think a massive example of this is the Brine Bloods compared to Troll Bloods. Troll Bloods, you had to have situational things. You had to sometimes hit certain things. You had to have certain spells and all these abilities that were quite all situational. They had to build up together. Whereas I think we've spoken about Marauder Crew, where it's like, well, if I've bought a UA, if I've brought this solo, then that gives a buff, that gives a buff, that gives a buff. Then none of this needs to be rolled, and then it has a super output, a bit like Death Stars, sort of in other game systems. And that's one thing where I don't think it's bad, but I think it's something that needs to. I think it needs to be tweaked for me. For the game just being a bit too lethal. For on the flip side of it, it's positive that you can build up that turn, but I think for me it's too lethal and too easy for things to be played out without any risk of failure.
Yeah, valid. So I think so in terms of like the I go you go sort of discussion, separate from lethality, I think the obvious advantage of I go you go is, like you say, some Warmachine terms where you're getting let's say you're suffering, your opponent's having an excellent turn, you might have to sit there for 20 minutes and take a turn of punishment where you get lifted off. That is the cost of yourself sometimes having excellent turns and lifting off your opponent's army. So that swings and roundabouts. If your opponent's having an excellent feat turn and they kill 50 points and you don't really have anything to do apart from lifting models off, that doesn't feel so great. So that's not always a good thing. If you're on the offensive, I think it feels great. It cannot feel so good on the reverse. And then in terms of an I go you go system, I suppose what the advantage of that is that you don't really have that. Your opponent takes their one activation, they activate their one unit, their one model, they take their action, and you get to respond. But what I think you lose in that sense, you lose that build up, right? You lose that layering of activation.
And because it's reactive, it also means that you can be planning how you can react, but then if they do something that mucks up that model or kills that activation, playing Guild Ball competitively, so as soon as someone's like, right, you've put six influence on a character, what happens if I kill that character? What's your turn going to do? Or what happens if I move it in a different position, or if I swing one way? You've built up all that, you've planned for your whole turn at the start, or you've thought about your things, but actually if you mitigate that reactivity, then actually that can also have that sort of not negative play experience of seeing that it's okay for things not to feel as fun, not the negative experience that it's too bad and I hate it, table flipping, but it can make you think, but that's why they have positive negative aspects to both of them.
Totally agree. And then in terms of lethality, it's quite an interesting discussion, because I did have one comment on one of my videos saying that they don't agree with that, and that's a really interesting discussion, because locally we certainly feel that way. I think is that the game currently is incredibly lethal. Not just in terms of how much damage things do, but how accurate everything tends to be. I think mat 7 and above tends to be more common than hitting at mat 6 and below. Partly of that is spell rack, and I think spell rack will be a separate discussion, because I think that's actually one of I'd like to change points. But in isolation, I think the game currently, for example, if I leave, say, a dire troll in range and objective, and units can get to it, I'd say more often than not, I would accept that if I leave that diatrol in, in that on that objective, it will get killed. It's not so much that it might get killed, it might not. I would say that the power things hit at do just tend to lift things off. And what I've sort of done in my list, and similar to you, Dan, we've put things in our armies that we're just happy to have killed. So like I've got boarding party, I'm happy just to run them onto an objective or run them to contest. They die or don't die because they're very annoying. But you've got things in your army that you accept will die. Then you've almost got a second wave that you actually want to play with. And I think sort of the powers things get to. I think a few things in my head. Trike power 26, Marauder crew power 17. Dreadguard cav that are 4d6 always on living models. There's lots of things like that. Gravediggers with their power 19 CRAs with fuel crates that are rat 9 most of the time. Things like that where numbers that you just think there's nothing survives that. So I would like to see sort of numbers, maybe sort of powers brought down a little bit, and then maybe base mat maybe brought down or base rat brought down. But that might tie in with something else that we might want to change. But I do agree that lethality in a game is a bit dialed up to 11 at the moment. We feel.
Well, we've mentioned it. I'm just going to put it out there. Spell racks need to go. I think I spoke earlier about how feats should be unique. I think spells should be unique. I think you should have to make a choice of which cast you're taking. And I think we mentioned about mat buffs or mat increasing. It feels like everyone and their mums has got carnage at the moment. It feels like my Death 14.
Not House Callus though.
Not House Callus. And it feels and the same way with sort of. I don't know about you, but spell racks, it feels like you're only always taking the same 2 or 3. I think that the idea behind them was interesting. I think but actually when not all spells are equal, and when you've got a spell rack that means that everyone's going to take that one and that one and that one, it just really, I think it makes it a bit more boring. I'd like to see them go. Personally, because I think also I don't like the timing sequence. I know this is not I don't know if it's the Mark IV rules or it's the Steamroller rules.
That is tied to Steamroller at the moment, the way that works.
Okay, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I don't like the fact that you choose your spell rack after you know what you're facing. I think it's like if you said, right, there's a spell rack, but actually you've got to choose it at list creation. I'd prefer it. I don't like that level of customizability to who you're facing and the table maybe and things like that, but also I think it really does make a difference in the Mark IV and the Mark III factions. That's my TED talk. Thanks for coming. Aaron, what do you think to spell racks?
Yeah, fair. Darker Day said in terms of 40k rules are repeated verbatim, so a power spell is exactly the same wording no matter where it appears. In Warmachine he's referring to that because obviously in 40k I've found that Tyranids have a rule which is called like catalytic hormones, and war space means have feel no pain, and they are the same rule, but they got different names. And he says, I hate GW for writing the same rule, slightly different in 2 armies, and so causing doubt in how it's applied. I do agree with that. So spell racks, I think there's like 3 separate points for me that, so when I joined the game in January, spell racks completely new to me, and I was like, it's quite cool. Every game I get to pick out 10 spells, and it makes every game be different. So I pick a different spell every game, and that'll be cool. And then, sort of like say 10 games in, I was like, well, 4 Fury strength for Marauder crew is pretty good. So any of my warlocks can make them power 17 with a solo. So I thought, well, that's pretty good. I'll start taking that pretty often. Then you've got like Fortifier, which is +2 armor and can't be slammed. And quite a lot of the game wants to drag you or push you away or move you. So that's pretty good. And if you've got a third spell, you might flex some spell like Rough Seas, which every warlock has. Which if you shoot me, you have to roll additional dice. So it became, every game it was like, I'll take Fury Strength, I'll take Fortify. Oh, can you shoot me? I'll take Rough Seas. And if feeling spicy, I might take a black spot to reduce people's death. Though the army is so accurate, I don't tend to use that too much. And then also Petition to extend threat ranges. And there's 5 more spells that I've not even spoke about, which there's 1 I've never taken, and there's 4 that I've taken for a bit of a laugh, but never really cast. So I think the idea of the spell rack is nice in principle when you speak about it, but in practice, I think what it ends up is 3 things for me really. First of all, it allows you 1 warlock to test tech for an awful lot of things. So if, you know, for myself, pick Admiral Boomhauer, for example, because I'm playing her a lot. You know, she naturally just gives my army +2 defense on the feet, and that's it. So, you know, that wouldn't really be a gunline choice, right? It's not really much defense. I haven't got stealth or anything. But on the rack, I can always rack Rough Seas. So that Warlock is now always an anti-gunline caster. You know, always. So then another example is Fury Strength. Okay, she does actually do a lot for infantry, but maybe, you know, she doesn't have Fury Strength, so it doesn't make my Marauder Crew power 17. So maybe I have another Warlock for that. But in this instance, she can do that as well, because I can rack Fury Strength. She can also do that as well. And suddenly I'm playing a list, and they've got some drags, or they've got a feat which pushes me. Imagine that. I'll rack Fortify, and I can negate the feat. So no longer do I really have to sort of target a Warlock for a scenario. A lot of the time in my list pairings, and I think other people have sort of said this, you can create one list which covers, I'd say, 90% of your matchups, and then you have this other list which sort of like, for me, for example, I've got Boomhowler, I've got Firequill, who I might play into sort of Sepsira or Kaiphos or Moraine. Apart from that, I'm going to play Boomhowler. You know, and a good example of this in the current War Table League, I'm fortunate enough to be 3-0. I've played my first 3 games, and I've won all 3. I've only played Boomhowler. I didn't have any need for my other list because she covers most things. What do you think about that, Dan?
I think that proves the point that you're just able to tech. You know, you're not having to make choices, and you're not having to have list selection for adapting. There's no. Where's the risk? I think when it comes to spell rack, where's the downside? Where's the, you know, if every Crix caster, every Orgoth caster can take Carnage, apart from Butcher, but like, you know, if you can take Carnage, you're going to take Carnage because a mat buff you then are really likely to hit, and then you can obviously, like Crix with the damage, the armor debuffs. I think it takes away that individuality of different casters. But I'd go as far as I'm going to add this one on here. I think the same with command cards. I think that you pretty much using the same command cards. I'd just get rid of them at this stage. I don't think it's right that everyone should have access to Pathfinder, that everyone should have access to Blessing, everyone should have access to cover, everyone should have access to healing. I'd get rid of it. And I think also that would also help new players. I think it would help you get, because you've got to have your army, you've got to have your tokens, you then got to necessarily get some cards, or you've got to think about when you're going to use the command cards. The command cards themselves, they're really beneficial to players like us that want that extra, but like, actually, no, we can situation that's really good, and that we can use that. But actually, when you look at it, you're taking the same 5 command cards, you can then tech the same thing. You know, if every army can have blessed weapons, then where's the need to look in your army list to go, where's my magical weapons to deal with incorporeal? That's another, I mean, you might disagree with that one, but yeah, I just think that let's try and make, you know, casters unique and more. And then you also will see, I think we've spoken about Orgoth. Is it Horus? I always get the word.
Yeah, Horus. Yeah, I've got a list, but I can't say it well.
That's fine. Horus, like if you meant that he wasn't just the armor crack, you know, the armor buffing, but also he could give Carnage out, he could also give you rerolls, all the rest of it. If that was spread across, it might buff up other characters. And also, if like I say, if everyone's not taking the same 5 command cards, it means you can have really difficult situations. There's going to be risks to your play, which might tone down the lethality, because you're going to have to think, actually, I can't risk. You know, actually, I need to really think about where I'm going to position this, because this is really, really important.
Right, so a lot to unpack there.
Sorry, mate, yeah.
No, it's good. So first of all, we've got a bunch of people talking in the chat, which is fantastic. Darker Day says, but picking the rack in response to matchup feels a bit good. Yeah, we sort of agree. I think part of making a list feel a bit specialised might be that you lock your list. So if I have to lock Rough Seas Fury Strength and Fortify, for example, you know, at least Boomhowler then is dedicated to gunlines, rather than being able to flex into gunlines all the time. I agree with that, Darker Days. Jacob Graham, another Brian Blood's brother on the WTC team. Thanks for joining in, Jacob. He likes the idea of the spell rack in theory. I wonder if only having one rack option with more specialised spells on the rack would be better at reducing CNS space on every list. Yes, I think there wouldn't be nothing wrong with just giving Warlock spells again, and then suddenly Boomhowler, if she gets Fury Strength but not Rough Seas, she could be my dude spam lady, but I have to look elsewhere to cover my shooter matchups. But I do agree, more specialised list and not being able to pick from a pool, I think is what we're all sort of alluding to here. Arthur, I would say that being able to pick less spells and make the warlords more unique would be a nice way to balance it out. Yeah, we totally agree with that, mate. And Jacob agrees about the command cards. So I was going to unpack what you said because there was some really good information in there. So first of all, last thing about spell racks is I agree that they do add to the lethality. I think there's two parts to it. One is spells like Carnage. Make you, obviously everyone suddenly, if you're mat 7, you're mat 9, so you don't miss. And then partly also things like Silence of Death, where not only are you adding, so 3 factions have this now, and I know because I'm a Brian Bloods player, not only do you add +2 damage to sort of any unit on the table in 3 whole factions, you also add Grievous Wounds. So not only are you sort of saying that this whole faction could be +2 power with all of their warlocks or warcasters, you're saying that any army in that unit could also ignore tough. So I think, I would prefer to see, personally, my solution would just be give a warlock 6 spells, and that's their 6 spells, and then you can build lists from there. Then command cards. So I do agree with you. As a Brian Buds player who has no Pathfinder in the whole faction apart from one frog riding a turtle, I would be really sad to see a Careful Reconnaissance go. But I do agree that where you're losing uniqueness across armies when every army has Blessing of the Gods and Careful Recon and Hit and Run, so you can repost something every game, and Duck and Cover, so everything gets cover, and then you probably got Defenses or Sapper or Lucky Penny, so why they're a good tool for every army to have. If every army has it, you just sort of suck a bit of the uniqueness out of the game. And another thing for me, really, the key thing, Blessing of the Gods, is that typically I'd say you need 2 good turns to win a game, and probably 1 very good turn to win a game. So when you're trying to set up your defensive pieces, I've got Fortify. I'm going to fortify my heavy and or my colossal, as an extreme example, and someone blessings and kills it. What does it really matter that you've got Fortify? If you kill the key model you need to kill with blessing, find that it really devalues the defensive spells. The only really way you get any use for that now is you have to take a good example would be for me to play Ragemonger with armor 23 heavies in melee, and then have Fortify on them to force someone to burn through a Blessing of the Gods to kill 1, and then once their card's gone, I've got 2 more heavies that they might struggle. But if you're not going to do that and don't want to do that, you want a diverse list, and you just want to have one of the thing that you want to defensively buff is gone by Blessing, and then it might be the game might be over. So I'm not a fan of Blessing. I'd rather that your defensive buff matters rather than the turn that it wants to matter. It gets Blessing. So I think if they are going to do command cards, I'd rather either every faction get 5 command cards, which is you have to take the same 5 every game, but they're unique to the faction, or there's 5 command cards that everyone gets, and everyone has to use the same command cards. I'd rather they have 5 unique faction cards, or sack the cards off completely so people don't forget to use them anyway. But maybe give a few more things in Brian Blood's Pathfinder before we do that.
I mean, Carnage in Dusk would go down really good. I think there's that difference between, and I think what's one thing we do now as players, because we've grown up. We used to, when we were younger, we'd go, but we want my faction to be the best, strongest, have all the toys. Whereas now we're older, we're going, actually want the game to have longevity. We want people to enjoy it. We want to have games that are interactive and fun and engaging, not just steamroller people. And that's where I think having that, getting rid of them, meaning actually you've got to make choices and list decisions, and positioning's more important. All the rest of it, I think it would be a benefit. I don't think it's ugly. I'd put it in the bad call for my thing. I do think the lethality and the just the mat, and specifically the mat increase and the accuracy is ugly. I think it's an ugly part of the game because it means actually you're not having to worry. Lots of factions just can automatically hit unless you roll less than a 3, and it's not cool in my opinion.
It's not cool. Jacob said my hot take about spells is I think control-wide effects are inherently too powerful. Things like Carnage, Rough Seas. So I do agree with that. I think things that cost you like 2 focus to make your whole army +2 to hit. If that was like target unit gets +2 to hit, you'd probably still take it.
Or I think they should be more the higher cost. So deceleration, for example, should be cost 4.
Sure.
Or really, you've got to invest. If this is the thing you want on your whole army, you've got to invest in it. But also, you can't increase that cost because of the lethality of the game. Where then, if you've got casters or warlocks that are then going to have less to transfer or less to reduce damage, they're going to be even more vulnerable to assassination.
Yeah, I think that change would maybe come in tied into maybe a lethality change where things don't hit as high, and maybe rat and mat is a little lower, and power is a bit lower across the board.
I
You go.
was going to give a positive thing. I don't know if you anything else you want to add to the cards or
No,
spell
I
racks.
think with the chat we've also agreed that I think we agree that maybe a more focused spell list, less options for a one list to cover so much breadth would be good for the game and make warlocks feel a bit more unique. I think we all agree on that. And command cards, people people agree that people are taking the same cards over and over and over again, and rather than adding a nice little unique, I'm going to pick this card this game, you're giving every army access to the same tools, which might suck a bit of unique out of the way. But you crack on with your next one.
Positive of Mark IV for me is that the factions, apart from the spells, the factions have great identity and feel thematic. It doesn't feel like there was a time where you could build for effectively a meat mount. You still get meat mountain lists, but it felt like in Mark II there'd be like this prototype of an army, this prototype of an army, this prototype, and it didn't really matter at one stage in the cycle because there was such a huge range of casters in every faction. It felt like, well, everyone and their mums could have this, everyone and their mums could have that. Whereas I do think the factions visually look unique. I think that their rules, lots of them are more sort of more unique. It's just the spell rack really, and the command cards that bring that sort of cross homogenization. But I also think there's been a real focus more recently of improving the rules on units so that you don't have a different rule on a different named model within a character unit, because that was stupid. And I think that's a real benefit of saying, actually, this unit, if they are called the Last Hunt from the new Dust Box, they've all got the same rule, they've all got the same amount of boxes, easy peasy. That's just, and I think that's as a sort of a quality of life change for new players and just all players. I think that's great. I think that's a real positive.
Totally agree with you there. I think so. Obviously, they first did sort of Kador and Signar to sort of they were essentially, let's be honest, they were reprinted Mark III armies into Mark IV, and that makes sense. Get people that know Warmachine back into the game of a faction they know. Then they sort of did some Dusk and Orgoth and that, which, if I'm honest, they feel a bit like like Dusk is Mark III Ret in Mark IV, and Shadowflame Shard is Mark III Legion in Mark IV. But I would say now we've sort of moved on to Gravediggers and now Old Umbre. I would say that they are the first armies that, for me, they feel like they have tried to design a new Warmachine faction. It still looks like it should be in a universe, but they've tried to make a new concept. I mean, maybe Grave isn't completely new because they've always had trenches, but they've tried to design a new army, a new concept for Old Umbre. From the foundations, they've kept in mind that this is a new Warmachine army, and they've kept the feel of Warmachine, but actually including something completely new. I think an Old Umbre really encapsulate that it's very much Warmachine, it's very much Grimdark, but you've got a completely new concept into the game.
Yeah.
Arthur says, would you say that maybe if those spells cost more, it would be okay? Yes, we do agree that maybe if they cost more, but we think currently in the sort of meta that we're in, if you had to cast Carnage for 4 and you had to sit on one focus every turn, you can be very vulnerable because of the sort of the game we're playing at the moment. It's very accurate and hits very hard. Mid-table, you go, mate.
On that point, I think you're spot on. Also, it'd be turns where like I'm going to pay that for because I know I'm going to just wipe out loads of I'm going to just get so up on attrition. I think it needs to change. I think the spell rates need to change. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
There you go. Mid-table says control range spells shouldn't be upkeep, only paying 1 for 2 turns to keep a massive buff over areas bonkers. Yes, I don't think many of the powerful ones are upkeep. I think Fog of War might be upkeep, but things like say deflection or deceleration or rapid siege or carnage certainly is an upkeep. So that's silver lining, I suppose. Dark says Black 13th and Hounds are so annoying for having rules per model. Yes, and also, you know, when they market this as a 2-player starter box and you give someone a demo game and you go, here's a Black 13th, they've all got a different rule, and then every one has got 3 different gunshots you can make. It just, it doesn't work. So
just quick on that, we need to make sure it's very clear that I think everyone would have done this. Everyone would have seen a two-player army set and thought starter set. They have not said it's a starter set. That's not giving it, not saying it's okay, because I think they can mean things of those products to make them even more new player friendly, because I think they're fantastic for new players. But I completely agree with you that for a new player to pick up particularly the Kador and the Signal one, it's actually harder to teach them because you've got those different rules, and it's like, oh, and actually who do you target in that unit? Which of those models in the unit do you want to take out depending on which faction you're on? Whereas I think they've got better now with the Shadowflame Shard and the Lockbar Brothers, and then obviously the newest set that's going to be coming out whenever.
Yeah, I think that's very valid because they don't actually claim their starter sets. They're just a 2-player box. So that's fair. I think I might have said they're a starter set, and they don't claim that, so that's not fair.
But
I said that.
Everyone in them, I did the same thing as well. I thought this is a 2-player starter set. I bought it thinking I could teach my stepson Warmachine. He's 11 years old. Yeah, this would be brilliant. Like, actually, no, there's no way that's a good army to try and teach an 11-year-old.
And I do agree also, like, trying to realise what one of the hounds is a fucking nightmare. And then you've got to realise, oh, this one dude died. Did he give them prowl or did he give them inspirational? Yeah, so move into 3-man units that have, you know, like Lockabas have got Sanguine Bond, Relentless Shards, Gang. All 3 of them have that. Great. Power 20 when you buff them. Great. Jacob, Arthur, I feel like they need to be more expensive or go to a targeted spell. So that's in relation to the really powerful control area spells. I think we'd agree with that. They should have a cost that shows how powerful they are. Yep, we agree. Mid-table hounds are a great unit. They're a terrible unit to be put in a set which screams starter set. Yep, we agree. I think you see a 2-player set with a small amount, you would probably, if you played war table game before, you would assume that that's pretty a starter set. You know, you can share it with my buddy. We get a small force, and we will play the game with that. But fortunately, like we've said, with Shadows and Scum, and now with Elves and Dead Dudes, I don't know the name of that box. They've got character units they've all got the same rules, so it doesn't matter who you kill. And then Darker Days, the ghostly unit was also bad until they realised that because it was hard to tell the models apart, they have all the same rules. Yes, that's the Furies. I think the Furies have got the same rules. Excellent. So I think I agree with that point. I think I'm going to jump in with a bad. I've got a little list, and I think I've done all of them apart from one, which is good. I only had 4 things on my bad list, to be fair. And one of them is a bit of a little one. So 3.5 bad things out of a whole game system, I think it's not bad. Is sprays. So, you know, we come from, you know, from Mark 2, Mark 3, you had a template, and they wouldn't ignore too much. And I think the sprays were also, actually, 2 points here, actually. One, sprays are just enormously long in the game, I feel now. It used to be like a 6-inch spray you'd be happy with. I'd be happy with a 6-inch spray, you know. And, you know, 8 was quite rare and 10 was like, wow, that's really long.
That's a big spray,
a big spray. But I feel like now, you know, you get to, I said 10 is probably more of an average for a spray, it feels like now. You know, you can get to 12-inch sprays, but also you can increase the range of sprays, which is doesn't happen too often. But, you know, Fire Squill's 8-inch spray can go to 11, for example. So on top of that, in general, like, I feel sprays are quite long. They feel like they ignore the majority of the game. You know, you ignore cover, you ignore concealment, you ignore stealth. So you've only really got you know, hiding behind a cloud or terrain to be left as a defense to sprays.
Yeah. And the fact that they don't ignore being in combat, it's like, but it's a spray. If you're throwing a shotgun into a group of people, it's going to hit them all sort of fairly equally. I don't think that, you know, you dodging in a combat is going to make it harder for you to be hit by a spray attack. You had a flamethrower or something. I agree with you. I think that sprays there's too many sprays. I think they're too long. I think that they're too powerful. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're seeing currently a lack of single wound models.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a prime example of this that just came to my head actually is that I played Sherwin's Fawn Full recently. So he had Helga, who had Defender's Ward, she had Concealment, she had Stealth, and she had I think it was 2 transfers, etc. So I've got my lovely guy Firequill, who we all like locally. He walks up, he sprays her. So first of all, I ignored her Stealth.
Yep.
Then I ignored her Concealment. Then I used Blessing of the Gods, and I ignored Defender's Ward. So that is, that sums up, that you can have this tech, but with Blessing plus stuff, it's very easy to ignore all these pieces that you've set up. Um, so I think sprays probably maybe ignore one thing too many, and then also I think maybe they could probably cut 2 inches of every spray in the game, and I think that would make sense. Darko said the great thing about Necrofactorium is that looking at the designs, the Crix as a better realization of the designs from the Mark 1 book. Yeah, I think Crix, they look, Necrofactorium look bloody great.
Yeah.
Dead Arse, I missed the spray templates. I'm with you, Vale. I played a game this week against a fella called Jake. He was lovely. And I did a spray, and he's quite new to the game, so I would explain how sprays work. And it's actually, when you sort of explain it to someone how that mechanic works, it's not all that what's the word, sort of like sensible or easy to understand how it works. Like you pick this millimeter line. I'm saying I'm spraying this guy with a weapon, and then I put this laser line down onto the table, targeting a guy off in the yonder. So it was my quartermaster who's got an 11-inch spray when he uses extended fire. I target this guy off in the yonder, and then I fire this P line, this millimeter line of a spray across the table, and anything I hit, it just gets hit, and I have to roll to hit, etc. But when you're trying to explain, I'm firing my flamethrower, like 11 inches in a laser line, it doesn't really convey that you're firing a spray. And on top of that, right. But then you say, oh, this guy's in melee, so he's going to be harder to hit. And he's like, well, why? And I was like, well, that's just how it works. Even though I'm targeting you, I'm targeting a guy 3 inches behind him, and this guy happens to be on this tiny bead line. He's going to get some defense.
That guy can have stealth, and he could be in cover, but the thing that's going to increase his defense is him being in a combat.
Yes. So I think sprays, I would love to see a template back, because what I find is that even though it's harder to hit more models now because you've got this bead line, which again doesn't really make sense for a spray, it's also very easy to not hit your own things now, because you can just line up this bead line to just click, not hit you.
Yep. I'm going to play devil's advocate. I would say that without a template, it massively speeds up the game. It makes the game cleaner, because you know what it was like when we had people that, sprays. Oh, look, that is that. You could have a bit of an argument almost, being like, okay, does that spray clip that model? Does it that? But I think generally, yes, sprays need to be toned down. Building on your point, I think the same for AoEs. I hate the fact that you can target a model with stealth, automatically miss, and you get the blast damage. Now, for me, with an Eidolon that has a blast 10-10, well, okay, brilliant, I'm doing a power 10 on you no matter what. But I would like to see a change to that. I can understand why templates gone away. I think sometimes people think that templates are a bit more archaic in game design, and they do, it's something else you've got to bring. It's something else that you've got to try and get better skill with. So I can understand, and I do like the speed of the game now, and how sort of easy and clean cut it can be. But I think that both sprays and AoEs are too lethal. I think AoE should be that if you miss, you do just miss. You've still. I don't think it should be. I don't think the blast damage as well. I think it just needs to be reworked possibly. I think one suggestion I would have is that if you miss an AoE, your opponent gets to choose how many, if any, are hit. So if it's an AoE 2 close models, but if those two models within 2 inches could be your friendly, that if you're the active player shooting, because you've missed, your opponent can say, actually you've hit your own guys, or something like that. But that's just me. That's my own fault.
No, that's a good point, because actually I had not put blast down on there, but that's something we've spoken quite a lot about recently. I think because the two armies we play, I can use a fair few blast weapons, and you have a fair few models that are stealth / low armor,
Yeah.
it's come up quite a lot. A few things in the chat quickly before I crack on. Someone was just sort of misunderstood that a cloud stops the spray, which it doesn't. The terrain does, but there's a little sentence in the book that says if it's a cloud, it doesn't stop a spray. Blast, I think, is something that's come up for us quite a lot. Two parts to it, I suppose.
So many times.
Yeah, so as a person who can take sort of like reef trolls with ship guns, who can move 5 and shoot 15, 20-inch sort of like threat, and they've got arcing fire, so they can ignore models for line of sight. So essentially any model within 20 of that reef troll, stealth or not, I can target, and then if I miss because I'm AoE 2, I can get a power 8 damage roll on. So that doesn't feel two things, I suppose. It doesn't feel very interactive for an opponent if you've got a key stealth model that you need to hide and you haven't got a shield guard, and there isn't a bit of terrain near that model. There's no way you can stop that model being hit by an AoE that I suppose outside of reef trolls you can block line of sight, but against me, ignore them. But I think really the bigger part of it is the fact that when you miss, you get this guaranteed damage roll on the model. And in terms of reef trolls, so I can boost that roll. So power 8 boosted, 18 damage on average, probably kills that squishy stealth model that you don't want to die. But then I think the second element, which happens a lot with boarding party, and I've noticed myself, is that actively missing, like trying to make my opponent harder to hit, is actually beneficial to me sometimes. So there's been times where I've actually moved my boarding party into melee, so they get the in defense, they get +4 defense, and then I miss, and then I miss, and then there's no AoE because I miss, but I still get that power 8 damage roll. So often I've walked into like a unit of Mace Hunter snipey boys and be like, oh, your defense 17, I need double 60s to hit you. I miss, but I get a power 8 blaster and still kill you. So that doesn't really feel like how a blast damage should work. That even though I'm base to base with the model that I just threw the grenade at, I don't take any damage. I think it's difficult. I think they've sort of tried to move along with the current lines. I think like a good example is the Old World and Heresy, which is a bit more of the retro style games have kept their blasts, and 40k and Sigmar have removed them completely. And Warmachine have, similar to like unit movement, have tried to go for this very abstract, clean, templateless game that you're for the paying off of a bit of maybe immersion. You're getting some cleanness in how the rules work. But I think
Legion, like that's the benefit of it. And
I think specifically sprays, maybe they could ignore one less thing, but I don't actually mind how it works. Okay, it's not very intuitive, but I think in the game, the actual way it works as well, just maybe change what they ignore and don't. But I think Blast, maybe need a bit more thinking of how they actually work in the game.
I describe them, both those things, as not as good, not as bad, but I describe them as the ugly, because they're just a bit ugly with how they play. They're just not quite, they don't look the way they should look. They don't work quite the way you'd feel like they should. There was one point which I just thought of when you just said, I can't remember, there was a point that was really prevalent and really giving me intelligent, and I've forgotten it now. And it was one thing that I thought...
I'll speak about this guy with Val in the chat, and then hopefully when I'm speaking about it, I'll come back to you. Val actually hard disagree with our take on Blast. He said investing in a weapon with an AoE should come with something, even on a miss, which is a fair point, I suppose, because typically you do pay a premium for an AoE weapon. Maybe have a flat, low power on an AoE miss as a fix, though. So you could say that all AoEs are power 6 when they miss. And that would stop like Bisons. Bisons do it, not a Bosun is what I can take. A Bison doing his both barrels AoE attack, missing, and then doing a power 14 blast roll. So that would sort of maybe fix that the fear, like there's not much of a downside from missing. That if you did miss, you would only get a low blast roll. So it would still be useful on sort of armor 12, 13 things. You still might do damage, but what you're not doing is missing like a key solo and automatically killing it. So yeah, I think Val's got something good there. Has your thought come to you?
No, it's not, and I've even looked through my notes and I didn't write it down. It will come to me probably in a dream in a couple.
Yeah, you'll message me like 3 a.m. Be like, this is what it was.
If it comes to me, in the next 5 minutes, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
But
we're gonna probably go for 15 minutes more, and then we'll wrap it up. But I must say, we peaked at 17 people watching today, and we've had more chat than we've ever had. So I want a heartfelt thank you from me and Dan. Me and Dan we talk all the time really about Warmachine. Yeah, but it's lovely to speak to them once a week, and we get on with really good friends, and we get on really well, and it's lovely to catch up. But people sort of joining us for this conversation and interacting with us, and talking about our favourite game, it's actually like a real highlight of me and Dan's week. So we're really grateful for everyone that's tuned in.
I think it's really important as well for chat. Like, feel free to disagree. I think one thing we particularly find is actually it's really important to have those conversations and have disagreements and talk about it, rather than just because someone says it on the internet, just because we say it doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean it's gospel. You might be someone that loves Payload as a scenario, but we can all have our own opinions. You might be someone that's sitting there thinking, actually, you know what, Dan, I completely disagree with you. Your thought about spell rack, or Aaron's thought about sprays. Like, put it in the chat, because again, we don't want it to become an echo chamber of just everything that we think. Or
no, absolutely challenge people. You only, I think, healthy debate, learning from each other, challenging people's views is actually quite important to society outside of just this little thing. So if we say something you think, you guys know what we're talking about, I have this this viewpoint, please let us know. We'd love to talk about it and discuss it with you while we're talking. I think I've still got one sort of maybe good thing which we've talked around but haven't really spoke through. Is it just how good the core rules are of the game? So recently locally I've picked up Old World to play at my Harlow club. And I come to Chelmsford to play Warmachine with you guys mainly. And we're sort of doing a slow grow locally, so everyone's pretty new. We're playing in small points. But there's two things that struck me really. One is the density of that rule set. I wouldn't say it's any more complex than Warmachine, but I would say it's much more dense than Warmachine. So if I want to know how I move a unit, first of all, the rule book is great. First of all, how I move a unit, the rule book, I find, is a typical Games Workshop rule book, and people might disagree with me, but it's very unintuitive, where sometimes a rule it's not in, you go to a glossary, it's not where you think it is, you go to that page, that says go to this page. The rules are incredibly dense, whereas Warmachine, I find, rules are complex, but they are not dense or hard to understand. They're logical, they follow things you'd expect to happen, do happen, and why there's a few steps in making them happen. They're all explained very clearly, and where you expect a rule to be, it is. So I'd say the rules are written really well, and then I would say also how clear the rules are in terms of a grey area. So there's lots of times in my first 2 games of Old World now, I've played 2 small games, we've got to a point where I've had a multiple combat, this unit's given ground here, I've fled this way, whatever, and then we're trying to work out what way I flee, or what way I give ground, or what unit follows me up, or and sometimes we get to a point where we just don't know the answer. We've both got the rule books in front of us. We're both, we'd hope we're intelligent people, but we just can't work out black and white what we think the game is telling us to do. So we just sort of do something and say, right, we're happy with that. Yeah, exactly. But what we don't get in Warmachine, I never, apart from a couple of questions I've asked on the rules and FAQ and got a really quick answer. Very, very, very rarely is there a situation in the game where I don't know what should happen. I'm always able to find a point in the rules where I can very clearly tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And I think just the quality of the rules, being able to be complex but simple in a way, complex but simple to understand, and how well laid out the rulebook is, I think are 2 really good points.
I completely agree. It's the reason why I'm really enjoying playing Warmachine. It's my focused tabletop game. I really enjoy the clean play, the fact that you're not arguing about a rule book, you've not got part in the rule book which one sentence and another sentence contradict each other. Really happy with it. I think it's testament to all the design that's happened over many years, but also the increased sort of nature of factions getting more releases. Actually, they're really solid and they're really clear, and things aren't ambiguous, and that's a huge improvement. There can be balances issues within that, but actually, at least you're not going to argue about what does this sentence mean. So I think that positive is a really good place to sort of. My one question, so my thought was not necessarily a good, bad, or ugly. I think there's parts of it that are all 3. Is unit movement and the lack of coherency. I love the fact that unit movement's quicker. I love the fact that you've not got to measure coherency. I love the fact that it makes it really easy to position things, and it makes it really quite forgiving if you make a mispositioning error and things like that. That's the good part. Bad part of it, I think it's too forgiving. I think that I don't like the fact that my cats, when they reposition, can go in all different directions, and I can have threat vectors from all different places. I don't like the fact that my cat that might have my one model in the unit might not have line of sight to the original target, but as long as that one model does have line of sight, then it gets teleported, it gets placed 2 inches further forward, and then you can layer up things like that. So I think that can be bad for the fact that you can have just these threat vectors that come out of nowhere and that don't seem quite logical. And I think it can be ugly because I don't think it's I think it's not a great look for a new player when you have one model in a unit that's sat behind a building that can't be shot at, another model that's in the open line of sight, and if we were playing 40k, the fact that effectively both those models can do their damage output, because in Warmachine it's okay, I charge in, this model that's behind it gets teleported into combat, and I'm getting my value worth while also protecting it. So that's why I think that the unit movement and lack of coherency is both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm interested in your thoughts, Aaron. I'm interested in what people think, because I'm not sure whether I think overall it's probably just still a benefit because of that clean play, that quickness, and it's so easy. But I do have some concerns around it. What do you think?
So I sort of missed. What did you think was good about unit movement?
I think what's good about it makes it really quick. It's really efficient. It's really what's it called? It's really forgiving when you do misposition. The fact that you can move a unit model out and it can then get back into combat. I think that playing Star Wars Legion, it just makes it really fast. It makes you able to layer parts. The benefit is also you can get those threat vectors that you can't necessarily aren't always obvious, and it can be quite tricksy. I feel like if you've got it can show a difference in skill with that. That's one. That's what I.
Yeah, fair. So I think it's probably one of the most Marmite conversations in Warmachine is unit movement. I think I agree with you that I think it's hard to call if it's good or bad, because I think there's good and bad about it. I'd love to hear what people in the chat think about it, because people tend to have really like polarized opinions on this. Jacob said unit movement is a mixed bag. It's both simple and it gets really complicated, which is very true, especially when you get to start. You have some models that are knocked down and some aren't. And I've been like a big rules question on the Discord forum about 2 separate things about unit movement and knockdown, so it does get really complicated. But so for me, let's have a think. Good. Is it good or bad? So good, I think it's very, very quick to move units, right? You pick one dude, he runs, you place the guys. Very simple. At least it's simple to understand how they do it before you get into all the nuance of knockdown models and that. But once you first play a game and you tell your opponent you just got to run one guy and place them within that, it's easy to understand.
Easy.
Like you say, you don't have to overly think about where you place the models in a unit. You know, you do. The game is really about positioning, wins you games, but you don't have to be too finicky about every model placement in a unit. You know, you want some in the front, some in the back. You want them near an objective, etc. But you're not getting worried about, is this guy going to charge and block this guy, or is this guy in the way? You know, units even ignore themselves for line of sight. So when you're shooting, you don't have to really worry where you place them. So I think that's an advantage that you say it's very forgiving. Then downsides, I think it's very also hard to explain to someone that you're going to run this guy, and then the guys at the back are going to teleplate 2 inches in front of the guy that you just ran. I think that from trying to explain to someone how you move in the game, say you come from 40k where you move 6 and then everyone moves 6, and then you tell them you move one guy and teleport these guys in front of that guy. I know they're going for some abstract view of making it very simple how you move, and they want it to be clean, but also it doesn't feel very sensible sometimes when you're doing it. And then, like you say, I think it also adds to the lethality of the game, because nearly all the time, if the unit does charge, you are getting most of your attacks. You know, like one Marauder crew gets into contact with a cohort model, regardless of where the other unit is, I tend to get 4 or 5 Marauder crew on telling you, because I can just place them and circle the model. I'd say that's probably a downside, because that adds to the lethality of the game, because when you charge, you tend to get your whole unit's output, or most of it. I'd say another downside is that you have that situation, like you say, where You can sort of, like you've got a building, you can hang one guy around the edge of the building and the other guys are behind the building, and then that guy charges and they jump over the building and teleport over the building, and suddenly the whole unit's in melee range. That again, not only can sometimes feel a bit weird, and I think sometimes we sort of forget that because we play so much now, that when we sort of teleport units, we're like, oh, well, this is how the game works. But when you play someone like who newer, or like say someone's walking past the game I'm playing and they play 40k, and I'm doing a charge move, and they go, how come those guys got there? I'm like, well, this is just sort of how charging works. Like this guy moves, and then I just teleport these guys. It doesn't really make any sense when you sort of break it down in how you're doing it. So I think that's probably not a good thing. And then ugly for me, it's really sort of that there's a very unclear area at the moment. So, I initially asked the question about units, that because obviously a lot of my units start sometimes not down, sometimes not, because they're all tough. So, first of all, I sort of asked, well, if a unit, say I have 2 guys knocked down and 3 aren't, and 2 of them forfeit their movement, and then the unit aims, can those 2 guys that forfeit their movement attack? And in the rules, there's nothing that says they can't. But, the Infernals have ruled now that they can't. So there's a ruling now by the Infernals that if you are knocked down and stand up and then someone else in the unit aims, and the unit aims, they forfeit their combat action. So that's not very intuitive, I don't think. And if you're a new player, you'd have to search the Infernals. But also now, so when in unit movement or movement in general, there's 5 options, right? The first option is forfeit normal movement. Now that sort of starts that sentence with your unit may be required to forfeit unit movement or normal movement. But what it doesn't say is if can you choose to do that. So as one of your 5 options, can you choose to forfeit normal movement? Now, again, that's not been clarified yet, and that's been asked to the Infernals. But I think on the face of it, unit movement can get really simple. But once you start saying that I've got 2 knockdown guys and then I want to charge, what do I do with these 2 knockdown guys? Or you want to aim or you want to run? Suddenly, it's not so simple. And also, it can be sort of quite confusing how it actually works. So even though they're trying to go for this really abstract, clean in-game approach, it can lead to situations which feel not so simple and clean.
Yeah.
So I think net result, it's really hard to say. I think there's good and there's bad. I think people don't like it, really don't like it, because they think it's just too far away from how a unit would actually move in the game. Some people really like it because they're not really fussed and they just want it to be clean and simple. And I'm sort of in this grey area where I quite like it because it's nice and quick. But I also realise that me tagging one cohort model within 12 inches of one of my Marauder crew and then get my whole unit on it makes the game more lethal. And then there's these complicated situations which I think aren't very intuitive for anyone. So I don't know where I am on unit movement.
That's why. Let's get it out there. I don't know how much time I've got left. Just very quickly, positive pre-measuring. Love the fact that we're not trying to guess places or do trigonometry like Mark II. Positive. The free strikes, trying to get around free strikes and measure free strikes, but again, used to be really you get gotchas and all that sort of thing. I think that's great. So they're just 2 quick ones that I think are really positive, and they're a really good side of Mark IV.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Vale says it's better, like in terms of unit movement, it's better because units are smaller now. Helps a unit get into combat, so if you lose 1 or 2, it doesn't feel so bad. Yeah, that's valid. So I suppose you've only got 5-man units. Now, if you lose 2, at least the 3 that charge will make their melee attacks most of the time. So completely valid. I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up there. I just want to give, first of all, a big thank you to you, Dan, for joining me. It's always great. And a big thank you to everyone in the chat. This is probably the most successful stream we've done in terms of the viewer count we've had and the amount of interaction we've had, and it's been really good. So me and Dan are genuinely very, very grateful. What I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to blast through some of the hobby in the Discord, because we haven't done that for a while, and it will be good to sort of show off what people are doing very quickly. I'll go through it and then we'll wrap it up. So we've got my Foul Blood list. We'll start with that. Yeah. I finished that off. I think it looks quite nice. Yeah. Go me.
Looked great on table, playing against you, playing with you. I think it was fantastic playing beside you. Really pops. I loved the video you did about your colour scheme as well and painting them. Yeah, good job.
Thank you. Next up, we've got some Old Umbre with the Chosen of the Witch and Strix. Looks sick. I think this is more Christmas stuff. I love the reds. Yeah. I'm doing gold and green because of Circle. We've got like a working on Big Pig, Carver, BMDD, absolute lad. A bunch of old Umbre together. I really like the red. Would side note, I think that Razor and Vilco and the Hounds look completely out of place in the faction. But side note, I don't think they look really weird in when they're with all the furry stuff. Big Pig, fantastic. I really like the effect they've got on the guns. Really nice. We've got a Zacchaeus. I've never seen this model in person. 6 points. It should be less. Really nicely painted. A Strix. I really like the whites and the browns on the Strix. Lovely. Aberration from Chris. Looks fantastic. I love your skin. I love your skin work. More aberration. We've got some more Old Umbre with a Feral and Primeval. Looks fantastic. My good co-host Phantasm. It's a work in progress where I'm at. Then some Locker Bash and Strix, which is work in progress. Some more Old Umbre from Chris. Blog's got his Locker Bash. It looks fantastic. Your finished Phantasm looks amazing. Really good job. I can't wait to get actually crit decap to 42 damage, but you've done a beautiful job. More Strix. Strix, you look great. This is finished Strix from Blog. Blog, your Strix looks amazing. And we'll finish up with Blog's Lesnoy, which looks great, and Lesnoy and Strix. We did that in 2 minutes. I think we should all be applauded for that. All of your hobby looks fantastic. Well done, everyone.
Keep it
thank you for watching, anyone who has joined. Massive thank you from me and Dan. And until the next time, we will